we have our X and Y chromosomes, but something else can happen that's well, it does involve SRY, but something else can happen to an entire chromosome. Say someone has only one sex chromosome and they only have an X chromosome. If they only have a Y chromosome, that can't happen because, again, with meiosis, you have to have at least one X chromosome unless something weird happens and there's nothing. And actually, I have to look that part up. But occasionally, sometimes people end up with just one X chromosome. So what happens in this case? Well, without the SRY signal, you can't have development of male reproductive organs. But the interesting thing is that these people, they actually need to develop into neither male nor female. So what happens is that their genitalia, they don't quite develop into a clitoris and labia minora majora and all other structures, but they don't develop a penis and body with penis and scrotum either. So what we have in this case is something we call gonadal dysgenesis, and what they have is ambiguous genitalia. So sometimes you might see partial fusion of the labia, or you might see an incomplete scrotum. You might not see you might see something that's not quite a penis, not quite a clitoris. If you're really curious what this looks like, you can just search Google image search. Please don't do that in front of polite company. But ambiguous genitalia, it's because if it's neither quite male, neither quite female, it is its kind of own thing. Kind of has characteristics of both, but the genitalia don't neatly fall into either category. And what they also did, the interesting thing is that, remember, with the presence of SRY or not, you have the gonads either developing to an ovary or a testes. But in these individuals who have gonadal dysgenesis, their gonads neither become ovaries nor do they become testes. So yes, these people are infertile because they don't develop eggs or sperm. Their gonads are what we call streak gonads, and this is what we see with this band of tissue right here. Doesn't really look like a testes, but doesn't look like a ovary either. So they're not really male nor female. So the interesting thing is that nipples and areola, they're common in males and females, and why is that? Well, the thing is that, even though that genitalia start to form at 11 weeks, nipples and areolae, they actually develop before 11 weeks. So male and female nipples are essentially the same at birth, and they develop before you start to develop external genitalia. So the interesting thing is, like, this whole explanation of why men have nipples is that we are all female, everyone starts out female. Not true. What happens is that embryos and fetuses, they're initially sexless. Again, we have to hit that 11-week mark before you start to see the development of genitalia. And the SRY gene is important for maleness, and then other genes affect maleness as well. And one of the genes that actually affects maleness is the androgen receptor. I didn't have like a slide for this, but the thing is that SRY is just the first domino that sets off a cascade of genetic activity. And one of the dominoes is androgen receptor. Now, in men who are actually women who have androgen insensitivity syndrome, so they might be XY chromosomal, but something is in their genes mutate, so they might have a mutated version of the androgen receptor. So what happens is that these receptors, they don't behave normally in response to normal levels of androgens. So if they don't actually if this androgen receptor is mutated and doesn't function properly, then these women, even though they have XY chromosome, even though they have testosterone, their receptors they're insensitive and they're not sensitive to androgens, so they develop as phenotypically women, so they develop as appearance-wise as female, even though they have an XY chromosome. They still get hormones from the testes. If it's talking about these XY androgen insensitivity syndrome, they don't develop testes because they don't develop that androgen receptor is non-functional, or they don't have a non-functional androgen receptor. And the other, well, not to get more complicated, but sometimes also androgen receptor doesn't work alone. It also needs other things to help activate genes. Sometimes you have a normal androgen receptor, but a mutated version of another gene that helps out androgen receptor, and this person develops phenotypically female. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah, so it's SRY, but this is why make a big deal about SRY. It's the first step. And if you don't have that first domino falling, you don't have maleness. And again, what we saw with SRY, if you have it mutated where it's non-functional, or if you have a deletion, then these individuals develop as phenotypically female. So a better explanation for everyone starts out as female is that we're all female by default. So if something goes wrong with SRY or the events that lead to the development of male genitalia, then we develop kind of like revert back to more of a female phenotype. Even though in those individuals they might not develop ovaries, pretty much everything else develops as appearance wise as female.